That morning, the glass doors of Brightcore Inc. slid open as a woman stepped inside. Sunlight hit the marble floor, lighting up her face for a moment, but no one in the lobby looked up. Their eyes were trained on polished suits and well-groomed white men who moved through the space like they owned it. She didn't look like them. She wore a dark charcoal cashmere coat, no logos, no designer bag, no assistant, no bodyguards. Her posture was tall and deliberate, and yet people stared at her with suspicion as if she were trespassing. At the front desk, Haley Cross glanced up from her phone and frowned. "Deliveries go around the back." Her voice was colder than the lobby's AC. A second of silence. The woman didn't move. Haley looked more closely, then pointed. "I'm talking to you. No deliveries through the main entrance." Comment 1 if that opening hit hard, and you already know this won't be just another normal morning. Brightcore Inc. sat in the heart of San Francisco's new tech district, a place where CEOs were treated like rock stars. The walkway was paved with white stone. Reinforced glass reflected the morning sun, creating an air of modernity, cleanliness, and exclusion. Inside, employees in business casual moved like ink strokes across sleek front desks, private elevators, and lounge areas flooded with light. On the wall, a motto read, "Innovation through inclusion." But the reality said otherwise. At Brightcore, inclusion applied only to those who looked like the board, white, Ivy League, and in leather Oxfords. The few black managers, like Nia Thomas, had learned to survive by staying quiet. As long as they didn't speak out, they were safe. So when a black woman walked in without credentials, unscheduled, unpredicted, the system rejected her like faulty code. It had been programmed that way from the beginning. Imani Brooks was one of the most powerful black female CEOs in American tech. But this morning, nothing about her presence gave that away. No media team, no entourage, just an eerie calm and eyes sharp enough to memorize every detail. Her hair was tightly braided and wrapped into a neat bun, elegant but unshowy. She was tall, shoulders squared, moving with the precision of someone who had once commanded billion-dollar boardrooms. But today she stood at a receptionist desk, mistaken for a delivery worker. What Haley didn't know was that this woman was the chair of Brooks Global, a firm about to invest $300 million into Brightcore. Everything was already in motion. All that remained was a scheduled meeting with CEO Elijah Ward to finalize the deal. And none of this was an accident. Imani wanted to be seen as powerless. She wanted to observe exactly how the system behaved, when it thought no one important was watching. Imani stepped up to the desk. Her voice was soft but unwavering. "Good morning. I have a 9 a.m. appointment with Mr. Elijah Ward. Could you confirm that for me?" Haley looked her over, eyes scanning her from head to toe, lips curling with contempt. "Name?" "Imani Brooks." Haley scoffed and gave a sharp laugh. "Oh, so you must be the CEO or maybe head of marketing?" She turned to her screen, tapped a few keys without interest, then looked back. "There's no appointment under that name. Maybe you're at the wrong company." Imani's gaze remained calm. "I have a confirmation email from Mr. Ward's assistant. If necessary, I can—" Haley cut her off, raising a hand. Her tone sharpened. "I said there's no record. If you don't leave, I'll have to call security." Before Imani could speak again, 2 security guards approached. One placed a hand on her shoulder. "Ma'am, please come with us. You can't cause disruption in the lobby." From the mezzanine, Nia Thomas watched. Her hand clenched the railing. She recognized Imani. Anyone who'd ever seen the first black woman to lead a multi-billion-dollar corporation would recognize her. But her feet wouldn't move, because she knew, if she stepped in, her own career would end right there. Imani was escorted out of the building. She didn't resist. She didn't raise her voice. Just a chilling silence. And eyes that spoke of a storm waiting to be unleashed. Outside the building, Imani's footsteps echoed on the stone pavement. She didn't look back. She didn't need to. Every glance from the guards, every lowered eye pretending not to see, was already recorded in her mind like corrupt lines of code in a broken moral system. Sliding into the waiting black SUV, she pulled out her phone. Rachel, her voice cut through the air like velvet-wrapped steel. Activate contingency plan B. Terminate the Brightcore investment immediately. Confirming? Rachel's voice hesitated. No confirmation needed. This isn't about business anymore. It's about culture. She rolled the window down just enough to see her own reflection in Brightcore's glass walls. A woman dismissed for her skin, her silence, and her presence. But this silence was no surrender. It was the opening blow. It wasn't the first time Imani had been disrespected, but this time, she wouldn't forgive it quietly. Upstairs, Nia Thomas hadn't moved. Her hands clenched the railing, knuckles white. The lobby had returned to its calm, sterile hum, as if nothing had happened. But Nia couldn't unsee it. She had met Imani's eyes, through the glass, through her silence, eyes that asked a wordless question. Why are you silent too? She turned away, but her eyes filled with tears. She'd survived this system long enough to know speaking up was a career death sentence. But this time, the woman they humiliated wasn't just anyone. It was Imani Brooks, the same woman whose photo Nia kept at her desk, a rare symbol of what was possible for Black women at the top. And she had let her be dragged out like a trespasser. Meanwhile, in a high-floor conference room, Malcolm Drake, executive vice president, stared at his phone. Brooks Global has just canceled the Brightcore deal. No reason given. A small smirk played on his lips. The plan was now in motion. That afternoon, Brightcore shook. The PR team couldn't catch up. Partners called in one after another. The stock dropped like a stone. No one understood how a missed meeting could cause such chaos. But Rachel, Imani's trusted assistant, quietly sent Brightcore's board a clip from the building's security footage. Haley Cross ejecting the CEO of Brooks Global like she was handing out flyers. The video leaked, social media erupted. Racism in the workplace? This is how a tech firm treats a Black female CEO? Under pressure, Elijah Ward was forced to hold a hasty press conference. Haley Cross was suspended, but the damage was done. Even Ward's own leadership was now under fire, accused of fostering a toxic culture. And still, Imani said nothing. She didn't need to. The world was doing the rest. That night, high above the city in her Brooks Global office, Imani sat quietly, eyes on a 24-hour news ticker. Her name filled the headlines. CEO Imani Brooks faces discrimination at Brightcore. Where did the system fail? Tech world forced to confront its diversity delusion. Rachel entered, holding a fresh list of firms hoping to negotiate with Brooks in light of the scandal. Shall we move forward with the new offers, Imani? Imani paused, then nodded slowly. But first, I want a full cultural audit on every potential partner. No more deals with systems programmed to humiliate women like me. She rose, looking out the window at Brightcore's distant tower, its lights still flickering. A hollow shell after the first strike. This wasn't over. Imani didn't just cancel a contract. She had launched an industry-wide reckoning, with nothing but silence as her opening weapon. Imani stood silently by the tall glass window, city lights flickering like streams of live data dancing through the night. Her hand rested gently on the glass, eyes fixed on the Brightcore tower in the distance, still glowing as if nothing had happened. But she knew the truth. The collapse had already begun. No press statement, no public reaction from her. And yet, within just 12 hours, a single terminated contract from Brooks Global had triggered a chain reaction, exponential and irreversible. On the monitor beside her, business headlines scrolled fast. Brightcore loses 11% in market value after Brooks Global pulls out. One click, one political move. Black CEO strikes back with silence. Imani tilted her head, a near-invisible smile ghosting across her lips. Sometimes, silence is the loudest sound in a system built to hear only the voices of privilege. Comment 1 if you believe that kind of silent retaliation hits harder than any press release ever could. At the same time, in Brightcore's 23rd floor boardroom, a crisis meeting felt more like a closed-door trial. Every eye turned to CEO Elijah Ward, a man caught between defending his reputation and confronting the consequences of a system he let grow unchecked. Cold white lights shone directly down on the walnut oval table. Laptops were open, showing tabs of breaking news, while the PR department's phones rang nonstop. I want to know exactly what happened, Elijah said, trying to steady his voice, though his eyes were bloodshot. We just lost our biggest partner, and no one can give me an answer? His senior aide, Trent Davies, glanced at a Twitter feed on his screen. Security footage leaks. Brooks thrown out of Brightcore like a delivery worker. Elijah's face twisted. The narrative was out of their hands. The media had turned a minor mistake into a cultural reckoning, and he had nowhere to hide. In the far corner of the room, one man remained unnervingly composed. Malcolm Drake, executive vice president of Brightcore. His graying hair was slicked back with precision, his custom dark gray suit immaculate. His eyes, always a few moves ahead, betrayed no panic. He hadn't spoken once. Just calmly tapped notes into his tablet, as if journaling the downfall he'd foreseen all along. To the public, Malcolm was the poster child of old-school tech gentleman, brilliant, calculated, deeply connected. But those who worked closely with him knew Malcolm never did anything without a political endgame. Right now, his gaze shifted to Elijah like a physician silently watching a dying patient, waiting for the exact moment to suggest pulling the plug. And deep down, Malcolm knew Elijah's collapse might be the leverage he needed to claim what had always eluded him, the CEO seat he believed should have been his 5 years ago. Who was in charge of front desk reception this morning? Elijah asked, his tone sharper now. Haley Cross, head concierge, replied an HR director, avoiding direct eye contact. We're reviewing security footage and check-in logs. Did she recognize Imani Brooks? No. It seems she assumed she was a delivery worker. The room fell into stunned silence. Jesus Christ, Elijah muttered, collapsing back into his chair like he'd been gut-punched. Trent hesitated. I'm afraid the footage has already leaked, and some say it wasn't just a mistake. Haley's behavior is being called outright racist and demeaning. Malcolm arched a brow, as if confirming a move had landed right on target. Then we may need to issue a public apology, or, at the very least, suspend Haley immediately. Elijah turned to Malcolm, eyes narrowed with suspicion. Did you know about this beforehand? Malcolm smiled, soft like a passing breeze. I'm just observing, Elijah, as always. And in that moment, Elijah realized this wasn't just a receptionist incident. It was a blade, sharpened and waiting. On the mezzanine level, Nia Thomas leaned against the railing, looking down at the main lobby. News of the incident spread faster than any virus. Staff whispered. Eyes avoided contact. The same faces that had turned away that morning now pretended to be buried in emails, acting like they hadn't seen a thing. But Naya remembered every detail. She remembered Imani being shoved out the doors like an intruder. She remembered how Malcolm Drake stood, arms crossed, watching, saying nothing. His silence made him complicit. Her jaw tightened. For years, Nia had swallowed every slight, every time someone mispronounced her name, every time she was interrupted in meetings, every time she was accidentally left off the invite list for executive events. She kept telling herself, stay patient, recognition will come. But this morning, she realized, if someone like Imani Brooks, the most powerful and accomplished among them, could be treated like this, then what hope did the rest of them really have? Her phone buzzed, a text from a friend in the industry. I heard you're still at Brightcore. You okay? That footage was brutal. Nia looked down at her trembling hands. For the first time in years, she was afraid, not of the system, but of her own silence. Inside the boardroom, the meeting spiraled into chaos. Some called for legal counsel, Others demanded a formal apology. A few wanted the whole thing buried through internal review, but CEO Elijah Ward was unraveling. We're being dragged down by something seemingly minor, but it's exposing a deeper, systemic flaw. He slammed his hand on the table, eyes bloodshot. Across from him, Malcolm remained composed. Let's be honest, Elijah, this wasn't just Haley's mistake. It's the result of a system you've allowed to fester for years. What are you implying? Elijah growled. Malcolm leaned back, gaze razor sharp. I've raised concerns about culture more times than I can count. You ignored them. You protected the wrong people. And now, we're paying the price. The room fell heavy. Elijah looked around and saw silent nods forming around Malcolm. That's when he realized the chair beneath him was no longer secure. Malcolm saw it too. He didn't smile out of joy. He smiled because the plan was now officially in motion. Take down Elijah and rise. Outside the boardroom, Haley Cross sat stiffly outside the HR office, face pale. Her eyes were red and swollen. Mascara ran in streaks. A communications officer walked by. Haley reached for their arm. Is the media asking anything? I didn't even know she was the CEO. The staffer pulled away coldly. Doesn't matter what you knew. What matters is the world now knows you didn't show an ounce of respect. Haley turned away, hands shaking. She used to believe she was indispensable at Brightcore. She took pride in screening visitors properly. But now, that small authority had become the heaviest sentence of her life. The HR door creaked open. The department head stepped out, holding a thick folder. Haley, come in. Her tone was sharp. No room left for mercy. That evening, in a quiet apartment, Imani sat with Rachel. On the table were internal reports from dozens of other companies, full of meeting invites, partnership proposals, even industry-wide apology letters. Rachel looked up. Do we want to respond? Imani tapped her fingers on the table. Not yet. I don't want apologies. I want real change. She stood, walking to the balcony. The city lights still gleamed outside, but now they reflected a battlefield in motion. Tomorrow, she said, eyes fixed on the skyline, prepare legal documents. We're filing a discrimination suit against Haley Cross for defamation and racial bias. Rachel froze. Imani, are you sure? Absolutely. I'm not doing this for me. I'm doing it for the thousands who've been turned away from doors like those and had no voice to fight back. Imani turned. Her eyes blazed like fire in the night. This was no longer about a lobby incident. This was a war to rebuild the entire system. At sunrise, just as the first rays pierced through the frosted windows of Brooks Global's skyscraper, a fax landed crisply on the desk of Brightcore's chief legal officer. It was a personal lawsuit filed by CEO Imani Brooks, complete with legal citations, claims of racial discrimination, defamation, and reputational damage. No dramatic language, no emotional phrasing, just annotated video excerpts, clearly marked. Every gesture, every word, every condescending glance from Haley Cross. Back in her luxury apartment, Imani watched the news ticker scroll. Brooks officially sues individual employee of Brightcore, an unprecedented legal move. Rachel turned to her, worry in her eyes. Imani, some people are saying you're going too far. Imani didn't blink. Number, I'm going exactly far enough. Comment 1 if you know this isn't just a lawsuit. It's a declaration of war against a toxic culture. Inside Brightcore, the air felt thick, like a poisonous fog. Employees whispered about the lawsuit, caught between fear and curiosity. Departments switched to defense mode, scrubbing emails, deleting internal logs, cutting ties to anything remotely risky. An emergency Monday morning meeting was called. Elijah Ward sat at the head of the table, pale as if recovering from a political stroke. She's suing an individual? He growled, eyes darting around the room. A deputy legal officer answered cautiously. Yes. And it's very well prepared. Surveillance audio, witnesses. She's not suing the company. She's targeting an employee personally. It's a remarkably smart strategy. Elijah dropped his head into his hands, muttering, "We've been boxed in. Any corporate response now will look like we're protecting her." At the far end of the table, Malcolm Drake said nothing, but inside his mind, a cold smile was forming. Imani Brooks wasn't just a CEO, she was a tactician. That same morning, Nia Thomas, the only black female mid-level manager at Brightcore, sat alone in her small office, eyes locked on her laptop screen. She was rewatching the video, the incident that had gone viral across social media. Nia shut the screen, leaned back, closed her eyes. The image of Imani being dragged out of the building replayed like a slow-motion film behind her eyelids. To Nia, it wasn't just humiliation. It was a perfect reflection of what she herself had endured. The elevator stairs, the meetings where her voice evaporated in a sea of white male nods. Every day she held herself back, refusing to disrupt the company's false peace. But now, she had seen Imani rise, and maybe, just maybe, she had been silent for too long. Her phone buzzed, an internal message. "Nia, leadership requests your presence in an urgent meeting with legal." Nia frowned. No reason stated, but something inside her stirred. She was about to be pulled into a game, and she had no idea which square she stood on. In a side meeting room, Nia sat across from Brightcore's legal representative. Sunlight spilled through the glass walls onto the polished wood table, elegant yet suffocating. "We need to confirm a few details," the lawyer began, his tone flat. "You were present on the mezzanine during the incident, correct?" "Yes." "And you became aware that the person escorted out was CEO Imani Brooks?" "Yes, after the fact." The lawyer leaned in, raising a brow. "So why didn't you intervene? Or report it? Or file an internal statement?" Nia exhaled slowly. She met his eyes and recognized the trap. She was being positioned, either as a shield or as a scapegoat. "I'm a mid-level manager. I don't have authority over security or front desk procedures. That falls under building operations, not me." The lawyer pressed his lips into a line. "We'll need a signed statement confirming you had no involvement or responsibility in Haley Cross's actions." Nia smiled faintly, her voice low but sharp as steel. "I'll sign it, but I'll also be sending a copy to my attorney." The room went still, and in that moment, Nia understood. This wasn't just about systems anymore, it was personal now, and her silence was officially over. That evening, as the Brightcore building glowed in the city's skyline, Nia Thomas sat alone in her office. The light from her monitor cast sharp angles across her tense face. In her mind, the company lawyer's words echoed. "We'll need your written confirmation that you were not involved." They didn't want truth, they wanted a signature, to erase accountability from the system and use her face, her skin color as a timely shield. Nia opened her email, ready to type her refusal. But her hand froze. She reopened the case files Imani's legal team had released. Every sentence, every recording, every annotated document, meticulously crafted. Bulletproof. Then, Nia clicked into a private folder on her hard drive, where she'd quietly archived years of internal memos she'd been told to ignore. When Black employees received lower ratings for identical performance, when her proposals were stalled with no explanation, when her name disappeared from the promotion list, at the last minute. She took a deep breath. This wasn't just about Imani anymore. It was about herself and the hundreds like her, silenced inside a smiling system. At the same time, Malcolm Drake met privately with James Halden, senior executive at Nexus Capital, a powerful investment firm behind many quiet acquisitions across the sector. Dinner took place in a candlelit, secluded restaurant. Only fine wine and sharp whispers. "If Ward falls, you're our ideal successor," James said, swirling his glass. "But we need to know, is Brooks really going all in, or is this just PR?" Malcolm smirked. "She never makes a move without strategy." James leaned in. And if she plays it all the way? Then I'll use Brightcore's own system to eat her alive. Once I control the internal nodes, she won't get a step beyond legal bounds. But Malcolm misjudged one thing. Imani had no intention of bypassing the law. She would use the law as her weapon, precise, lethal, legal. And while Malcolm plotted, an anonymous email hit the inboxes of Brightcore's entire executive board. Subject line, the real numbers, attached. The attachment? A cache of long-buried documents, biased performance reviews, manipulated promotion metrics, all-male, all-white decision panels, and one report, redacted and shelved, signed by none other than Malcolm Drake. By morning, Brightcore's C-suite descended into chaos. All senior managers were ordered to verify internal data. The press was on fire, but they weren't targeting Haley Cross anymore. They were going for the top, especially Malcolm Drake. Meanwhile, Nia Thomas quietly sent another email. This one wasn't anonymous. Subject: as an insider, I confirm every document is real. It was the first time Nia spoke up, not as a victim, but as a key witness to systemic rot. In the emergency meeting, Malcolm tried to remain composed. Someone is sabotaging us from within. These could be fabricated. But at that exact moment, Imani Brooks appeared, live on CNN. Her statement was sharp, leaving no room for negotiation. We don't want apologies, we want testimony and justice. As the live stream ended, Malcolm Drake stormed into his private office and slammed the door shut. He grabbed his phone to call James Halden, but the line was dead. Connection blocked. Contact revoked. Malcolm was spiraling. In less than 48 hours, he had lost his power, lost his network, and was now facing internal investigation. A notification blinked across his screen. Malcolm Drake is hereby suspended pending review of documented ethics violations. Elsewhere, Naya stepped off the elevator onto the ground floor. The late sun lit her face through the glass. A reporter spotted her. Were you the one who leaked the internal files? Nia smiled, calm and clear. I'm just someone who couldn't stay silent anymore. She walked onto the street. Her phone buzzed. Caller ID. Imani Brooks. Nia picked up. Imani's voice came through, quiet but charged with momentum. You've stepped into the fight now. You ready for the next round? Nia looked out at the Brightcore tower rising in the distance, the very place that once stifled her breath. But now she wasn't a part being crushed by the system. She was a new link, forged to tear it apart from the inside. The entire city was buzzing when the Civic Business Alliance website posted the headline, 25th Anniversary Gala Guest of Honor, CEO Imani Brooks. But what truly sent shockwaves wasn't the name. It was the venue, ground floor conference hall. Brightcore headquarters. She was returning to the place that once expelled her, but this time she wasn't coming in silence. That same day, the hashtag number sign, Watch Her Walk Back, shot to the top of Twitter trends. Social media began a countdown. News outlets lit up with headlines. Imani Brooks returns to the scene, but now she owns it. A viral video began circulating. Imani being escorted out of Brightcore's lobby, seamlessly edited into clips of a red carpet being rolled out for the gala. Top comment read, "This time, will the spotlight find the right face?" Comment 1 if you're ready for a comeback that burns through every label, where the humiliated returns as the one they can't ignore. 3 hours before gala doors opened, backstage was in chaos. An assistant barked into a headset, "Secure the North VIP row. No one changes the nameplates. Nexus CEOs demanding to switch seats." Another voice snapped, "Not possible." Center seats belong to Carter Tech. They're the headline sponsor this year. And everyone knew Carter Tech was Imani Brooks. Around the venue, the event slogan glowed across digital walls. Business, ethics, renewal. A phrase that sounded noble. If only people forgot that the venue itself had once been the epicenter of one of the worst ethical scandals in the tech industry. Live news tickers blared across screens. Brightcore CEO missing from gala lineup. Company turmoil grows after EVP suspension. But tonight, the lights wouldn't shine on polished suits and white collars. Tonight, every lens would follow one woman, Imani Brooks. A black SUV glided to a stop at the venue entrance. Imani Brooks stepped out, her matte black heels clicking against the red carpet. She wore a sleek black silk jumpsuit with a high collar. No luxury logos, no stylist fanfare. Just matte black stone earrings, her personal emblem, worn only during moments that mattered. A cascade of flashbulbs went off like fireworks. But Imani didn't wave, didn't smile. She simply stared at the glass doors, the same doors where a year ago 2 guards had shoved her out like she didn't belong. A CNN reporter shouted, "Ms. Brooks, how does it feel to be back here tonight?" Imani paused for just 1 second. "I'm not back, I'm moving forward, but some places deserve to witness that with their own eyes." Her answer was posted within 12 seconds. 15 minutes later, the clip had over 2 million views. Tonight, Imani wasn't walking in as a guest. She was walking in as the one delivering the verdict. Inside the gala hall, a round table marked "Pioneers in Corporate Equity" sat in the center spotlight. Companies were seated alphabetically, yet somehow, Carter Tech landed dead center. Across from Imani sat Nia Thomas, now hailed by the press as the silent whistleblower. When their eyes met, no words were needed. Their gaze said it all: recognition and an unspoken pact. But in a shadowed corner, Malcolm Drake, despite his suspension, slipped in with an invitation borrowed from an external guest. He spotted Imani Khao, and his jaw tightened into a bitter smile. She hadn't just survived, she now ran the room. On stage, the MC began. "Tonight, we honor an individual who has shaped the national dialogue around corporate accountability in the modern age." All eyes turned to Imani, but as the spotlight tilted her way, a single, slow clap echoed from the back row. Imani turned her head. Standing in the shadows was Haley Cross. The room froze when a pair of cold, calculated claps echoed, separate from the thunderous ovation meant for Imani. The lights shifted. A figure emerged at the edge of the red carpet. White shirt, hair neatly tied back, eyes sharp and ice-cold. Haley Cross. Imani didn't move. Nia glanced over, her body tense. The atmosphere thickened, like something sacred was about to fracture under the weight of a secret forced into daylight. Haley grabbed a mic from a stunned event staffer without asking. "I just want to say a few words, because if someone's being honored tonight, the full story should be told." She turned to the audience. "I was the one who called security on Imani Brooks. Yes, it was me. I won't deny that, but let me tell you what happened before that day." Her voice was steady, like reading a quarterly report. On the LED screen behind her, the technical team scrambled, but Haley had plugged her mic into an auxiliary channel, outside the official sound system. Imani said nothing, but her eyes, razor sharp, never left Haley's lips. "Before that day," Haley continued, "Carter Tech forced Brightcore into a merger many of us in leadership did not support. Some resisted, others feared losing their jobs. I was just another worker, but I was turned into the scapegoat." A ripple of whispers spread through the crowd. Some knew the tactic well: throw frontline staff under the bus to protect executives hiding in shadow. Haley stared straight at Imani. "You knew the truth, but you made me a symbol of racial bias for your campaign." A twist, a psychological blow. Some guests shifted awkwardly. Hands dropped from applause. Journalists began typing stories with new headlines. Was Imani Brooks just a victim? Then, barely audible, a phone dinged from Nia Thomas's seat. She glanced down at a new message. "Play the file attached. Urgent." She opened it. A recording. An internal conversation between Haley and Malcolm Drake, just weeks before the incident. Malcolm's voice was crystal clear. "You know what to do." Don't check the list. We don't need trouble from people like her. Haley responded, I'll handle it. I'll have her tossed like trash on the curb. Nia walked to the stage. No permission. Mic in hand. USB already streaming to the Bluetooth system. If people want the whole truth, they should hear all of it. The audio thundered through the hall like a gavel hitting wood. It lasted under a minute, but that was all it took to shatter Haley's carefully staged spin. Her face drained of color. You had no right to record. Nia cut her off. Don't talk about rights when you colluded with what's wrong. The crowd's gaze shifted, no longer curious, now disgusted. Imani stood. She walked onto the stage. No eye contact, no ceremony. Just one line, sharp and final. Don't mistake being small for being spineless. She turned to Nia, a small nod. The signal. The MC stepped in and ended the unscripted segment. That night, on the evening news, Imani Brooks and Nia Thomas appeared together, publicly, for the first time. The lights no longer muted them. They revealed every feature, every crease, every truth. In the studio, the host asked, if you could go back to the moment you were escorted out of Brightcore, would you do anything differently? Imani paused, then answered, soft but unshakable. I'd walk out the same way I did. No protest, no tears, but in my mind, I was already rewriting the rules. Nia smiled. And tonight, we read the first chapter. On screen, a new logo appeared, the Phoenix Protocol, an ethics reform initiative for the tech industry, funded by Carter Tech, led by Nia Thomas. A new chapter had begun, but off-camera, backstage, Mark Benson, former founding director of Brightcore, sat in silence, watching, and in his hands was a blueprint for war. The morning after the gala, headlines across major business outlets dropped a bombshell no one saw coming. Mark Benson, founder of Brightcore, returns as interim executive chairman for restructuring. The news struck like thunder. No one understood why a man who had disappeared into exile after a scandal 5 years ago was suddenly entrusted with Brightcore's future. Worse, reporters uncovered that the decision wasn't voted on publicly. It was enacted through a clause buried deep in the company's original charter labeled Shareholder Asset Protection Protocol. As Imani Brooks exited the CNN studio, her phone buzzed. An internal advisor had emailed her. One line stood out, Brightcore has activated Protocol MB. She frowned. Mark Benson wasn't returning to save the company. He was returning to protect the system she was tearing down. Comment 1 if you feel it too. The old power structure just started its death rattle. The Brightcore headquarters was now cloaked in solemn silence. The company's logo was temporarily replaced with a gray minimalist design. A new sign hung in the main lobby. Temporary restructuring phase. All interviews postponed. Internal investigations underway. But behind the calm was a quiet storm. Mark Benson had established a crisis coordination room deep in the sublevels, the former data archives now converted into his strategic bunker. No natural light, no press, just his hand-picked inner circle, veterans who had once been phased out, but who still held the keys to the system's hidden levers. Their first meeting lasted only 27 minutes. The digital board displayed one line, rebuild. No apologies, no admissions. Mark said just one sentence, raspy but firm. We don't need forgiveness. We need fear. Mark Benson, 67, tall and lean, deep-set eyes, silver-streaked hair. His movements were slow, but his presence undeniable. The gaze of a man who once built a tech empire from nothing. He was forced to step down after the white male ecosystem scandal at Brightcore, but he never fully vanished. Through shell funds and proxy trusts, he quietly retained controlling interest. Now he wasn't back for optics. He was back to undo what Imani had started. I'm not against Ms. Brooks, he said in a closed-door meeting. I'm against the way she's turning this company into a moral theater, weakening its edge. To Mark, a company didn't need ethics. It needed survival, and if given a choice between transparency and control, he would always choose control. That evening, in Carter Tech's office, Imani received a printed folder, no return address, no signature. Inside, a copy of Protocol MB, a clause allowing Mark to reassume command if a reputational crisis threatened more than 20% shareholder value. A single note was clipped inside. "You thought you'd won, didn't you?" Imani clenched the folder, eyes narrowing. Across town, at a televised press conference, Mark Benson declared, "We don't deny the mistakes of the past, but the age of outrage and cancellation is no roadmap for the future. Brightcore will rebuild by prioritizing efficiency, not emotion." A public slap across Imani's entire philosophy. No names were mentioned, but everyone understood. By nightfall, corporate forums lit up in debate. One side championed cultural reform. The other cried, "Enough with cancel culture and emotional politics in business." The board had flipped, and Imani knew this was no longer a personal battle. It was an all-out war between two worldviews. 3 days after Mark Benson's press conference, major business outlets began receiving leaked files. From an anonymous source, the headline of the dossier, "Rebuild or Rewrite." Inside, details of a network of shell companies, run offshore under Benson's control, used to manipulate stock prices, push female founders out of power, and covertly regain control of Brightcore, without ever going through the board. At the same time, Bloomberg Business published an 8-page exposé. Mark Benson, the old king in a rigged throne. That night in her private office, Imani opened her laptop. On screen, a shareholder map she and Laura had built 6 months ago, the week she was removed from Brightcore. She clicked on a red box. The company, Kingston Global Ventures. Shareholder list loaded. At the top, Imani Brooks. "Time to put the players back where they belong," she whispered. Her eyes didn't burn with revenge. They burned with order. Monday morning, Brightcore's entire executive board was summoned to an emergency shareholder meeting requested by Kingston Global Ventures. Most board members were confused. Mark Benson walked in confidently, taking the chair. "I understand there's some uncertainty," he began, "but in times like this, we need a firm hand to stabilize the structure." One person stood, then another, and then the doors opened. Imani Brooks entered. Black suit, no name tag, no anger, no arrogance, just the cold precision of a strategist. She placed a folder on the table. "I represent Kingston Global Ventures, now holding 24% of Brightcore's authorized shares through fully legal and registered restructuring. We are calling for a revote on the interim chair position." Mark's head snapped up, his face drained of color. You can't," Imani cut in, calm and clear. "I once couldn't even step through the door. Today I walk in to dismantle the frame itself." A scattered applause followed. No one said another word. The vote was held in tense silence. Result, 9-3. Mark Benson removed from all executive duties. In the final moments, he tried to hold on to some dignity. "I built this company from scratch." Imani met his eyes. "And you left it to rot from within." She turned to the board. "You don't rebuild a system by re-inviting the ones who broke it." Once Benson exited, Imani didn't claim the chair. She nominated Nia Thomas. A message, loud and clear. Real change doesn't come from power. It comes from placing the right people in the right positions. 1 week later, at the Future Ethics and Tech conference hosted by Carter Tech, Imani delivered the opening keynote. She didn't talk about the past, no names, no dramatics, only this. Real power isn't the ability to control the system. It's the courage to repair it, even after it's thrown you out. After the speech, a group of tech students approached her. A young black man, shy, asked, "Do you think people like me actually have a shot when the field's still full of people like Benson?" Imani rested her hand on his shoulder. "You don't need them to disappear. You just need to learn how not to become them." The final shot, Imani looking up at the bright core tower. Once the place she was dragged out of for being off the list. Now, she's the one writing the list. That evening, following her speech at the Future Ethics in Tech conference, Imani Brooks exited backstage in complete silence. No press, no greetings. Laura, her closest aide, quietly handed her a matte black envelope. No logo, no sender. Imani opened it. Inside was an unpublished confidential report from a European financial journal. Kingston Global Ventures, the hidden controller of stake networks across 18 major tech conglomerates, is allegedly owned by an unnamed individual never seen in public. Beneath it, scribbled in red ink, "It's you, isn't it?" Imani folded the page. The stage light still flickered behind her, but she wasn't in the spotlight anymore. She was behind the curtain, pulling all of it. Comment 1 if you're ready for the real reveal. From the woman once dragged out of the lobby, now sitting behind the system's mainframe. In a penthouse buried in Manhattan's financial district, a place no one would suspect, sat an unbranded office, listed only on paper as Global Risk Research Unit, Section 7G. Inside, a command center buzzed quietly. Dozens of monitors streamed real-time data from over 60 global investment firms, spanning Singapore to Dubai, Switzerland to South Africa. Colored lines flashed across the screens, tracking trades, news triggers, and capital shifts. At the center of the room stood a single leather chair, not assigned to any CEO. It belonged to one person only, the one authorized to redirect all Kingston capital flow within 8 seconds. And no one in the system knew the identity, only the codename, KGV0. That night, as Laura entered, Imani was seated there. She didn't speak, just typed a single command into the encrypted terminal. Initiate Level 5 transfer. Imani Brooks, CEO of Carter Tech. Once dragged from a corporate lobby because her name wasn't on a guest list. But that was just Act 1. Her full name had been hidden from public records. Imani Brooks Kingston, sole adoptive daughter of the late banking magnate Howard Kingston, founder of Kingston Global Ventures. A man who vanished from public view over 15 years ago, leaving behind a global financial empire with no named heir. After his death, all assets were passed on to a confidential designee sealed under international trust law. And now that identity was revealed. The woman once ejected from a lobby for the color of her skin now sat in the most powerful financial seat in the Western world. Imani wasn't just pushing back. She was running the board everyone else thought they owned. In a discreet Zurich law office, Mark Benson sat locked in tense discussion with a Swiss financial advisor. His face darkened as he read the latest Frankfurt stock report. All Brightcore capital reserves withdrawn within 36 hours. Mark slammed the table. "Who's doing this? Every fund I built, everyone I nurtured. How are they turning now?" The advisor didn't respond. He simply handed over a list of anonymous capital transfer orders, all traced back to systems under Kingston Global Ventures. Mark flipped the pages, his face drained of color. At the bottom of the ownership matrix, one familiar name appeared, I. Kingston. A long pause. Then he whispered, not to the advisor, but to the ghost he had once dismissed. "It can't be. She never wanted to beat me. She wanted to own the whole damn game." Inside the financial data center of Kingston Global Ventures in Amsterdam, a market-regulating AI system initiated a synchronized capital withdrawal protocol. Within 24 hours, 6 investment funds previously backing Brightcore began dumping their shares. On the NASDAQ, Bright plummeted, -3%, -7%, -11% in just half a day. At Brightcore's temporary HQ, crisis advisors frantically reached out to strategic partners. Every email received the same chilling reply: renegotiation will only be considered upon confirmation from KGV. Mark Benson stared at the last line, his eyes red with disbelief, his lips trembling. The woman he once called a lost girl in the system was now the one running the system. Mark jumped to his feet, shouting, "Who is she? She's not a CEO, she's a ghost pulling strings across the entire industry. Meanwhile, in her New York office, Imani Brooks said nothing. She didn't need to appear. Her hand was already inside the machinery Mark could no longer reach. The next morning, U.S. media broke the news. Brightcore officially removed from preferred index listings. The cause? Loss of financial credibility, lack of shareholder transparency, capital instability. A death blow, not from scandal, but from the market itself. A rushed press conference followed. Mark Benson took the stage, sunken eyes, jaw trembling. "We believe a shadow force is manipulating the market to bring down Brightcore," he stammered. A journalist raised a hand. "Are you referring to Kingston Global Ventures?" Mark didn't answer. He just glanced toward the monitor, where Imani Brooks's face appeared on a shareholder analysis slide. Underneath, a single line, KGV0, Final Decision Authority. The room fell silent. For the first time, the world understood. Imani wasn't the woman dragged out of the lobby anymore. She was the architect of the entire building. In Geneva, behind closed doors, a summit was held between global funds and Kingston representatives. There, Imani appeared, for the first time, as the successor to Howard Kingston. She said only one thing: "I didn't dismantle Brightcore for revenge. I dismantled it to rebuild what should have been fair from the start." Everyone who had participated in Mark's financial manipulation, bankers, lawyers, brokers, now faced investigation. Mark Benson was summoned before Congress, accused of exploiting shell structures to evade tax and manipulate markets. As he exited the hearing, reporters swarmed him. One shouted, "Do you have anything to say to the woman you once said wasn't qualified to step foot in your company?" Mark paused, didn't look at the cameras. He bowed his head and muttered two words: "I lost." That night at the top floor of Carter Tower, Carter Tech's new headquarters, a building once bought and abandoned by Brightcore, Imani stood before the glass, overlooking a glowing city below. Laura entered holding the end-of-day summary. Support from the tech community has reached 92%. Half the startups applying to the Carter Incubator come from underrepresented groups. Imani didn't turn around. She asked softly, "And Mark?" "He sold off the rest of his shares, vanished. Rumor is he's in Iceland." Imani nodded, her eyes no longer sharp. Just a flicker of quiet sadness. "He could have stood beside us. If only he'd stepped back long enough to realize he was wrong," Laura asked gently. "And the secondary plan? The foundation for the innovation hub?" Imani smiled. "Start it. But this time, it's not just a building, it's an ecosystem where no one will ever need permission to walk through the door." The camera slowly pulls back from the glass. The city below glows. A dynasty has fallen, and a new generation, led by a Black woman once dismissed, is rewriting the rules. Morning light gleamed off the glass of a building with a new name: Carter Center for Innovation, once Brightcore's headquarters, the same place that once denied Imani Brooks with no hesitation. On opening day, hundreds gathered in the courtyard, not investors, not the media, but those once harmed by the old system. Black students denied scholarships, engineers dismissed for their accents, founders excluded for being culturally incompatible. There were no spotlights on stage, no 3D visual effects. Imani stood in a soft ash-gray blazer, the same color as the cardigan she wore when she was dragged out of the company lobby. She smiled and said, "I didn't build this center for revenge. I built it so no one else would have to take the detour I did." Comment 1 if you believe the most powerful rebirths start at the very place where destruction once ruled. 1 year after Brightcore filed for bankruptcy, its former headquarters had been quietly purchased by Kingston Global Ventures, then transferred to Carter Tech for exactly $1 symbolic. The building was entirely redesigned, open layouts, no hierarchical floors, and glass walls engraved with anti-discrimination pledges, in multiple languages. On the main wall, bold black letters read, "We build where others demolish. We see where others dismiss." This wasn't just a workplace, it was a symbol, a scar turned into a badge of honor, a living statement. Injustice can be dismantled if the right people take control. Beside Imani at the launch stood Vanessa Lewis, the woman who once silently watched from the mezzanine as Imani was dragged from the lobby. Now Vanessa was the first executive director of the Carter Center for Innovation, overseeing its entire startup ecosystem, training pipeline, and minority tech transformation initiatives. No more gray corporate uniforms. She now wore a blazer in deep earthen red, the color of legacy, memory, and strength. When asked how she felt today, Vanessa answered simply, "I was once told to stay silent to keep my seat. Now I speak to make space for others." Unlike performative CEOs, Vanessa didn't offer glossy sound bites. She spent most of the day speaking to student groups, listening to rejected ideas, buried dreams, and voices that had once been ignored. But not everyone celebrated Carter Center's rise. Across town, in a quiet office owned by a former BrightCore affiliated fund, a group of former senior executives had quietly regrouped. At their head was Patrick Gaines, BrightCore's former director of external affairs, who once claimed diversity was just a PR trend. In the private meeting, Patrick slammed the table. "She's turned that building into a racial propaganda machine. If we don't push back, tech will be run by corporate politics." Another chimed in. "Carter Tech now controls over 60% of AI innovation capital. If this center succeeds, they'll have influence at the policy level." Patrick growled, "We need to dismantle Imani's image at any cost." What they didn't know was every step they were about to take had already been anticipated. 1 week after the grand opening, a leaked video surfaced on social media. Posted by an anonymous account, it accused the Carter Center of racially biased hiring, favoring Black applicants and excluding white candidates. Clips of Imani and Vanessa's speeches were deceptively cut and spliced alongside chaotic footage from job fairs, crafting a false image of disorder, favoritism, and reverse discrimination. Right-wing media seized it instantly. Is Carter Tech creating a new racial caste in American tech? Vanessa froze when she saw the footage. Her hands clenched, but Imani simply exhaled and picked up her phone. "Laura, activate Protocol 5. Tell the press we'll hold an open town hall tomorrow at 8 a.m. at the center. No rebuttals. No teary letters. They chose to open the doors, stand tall, and let truth walk in through the front." The next morning, there were no PR banners, no set design, just a circle of chairs. Leaders of the Carter Center sat side by side with members of communities once rejected by BrightCore. Imani stepped forward. No drama, no polish. She looked directly into the livestream camera. "I was once labeled not a cultural fit because I didn't look like the ones making decisions. Today, I refuse to repeat that mistake, no matter who stands on the other side." A young white man in a hoodie stood up, hesitant. "So, do I still have a place here?" "Everyone here doesn't look like me." Vanessa walked toward him. No judgment, only clarity and compassion in her eyes. "We didn't build this place to create special seats for anyone. We built it to end the special privileges that once made people like you think you had nothing to contribute." The room fell silent. Then came the applause. Not for the words, but for the restoration of something far more fragile: belief. By the end of that week, dozens of startups, multicultural, multilingual, multiracial, applied to the Carter Center's incubation program. Some had once been rejected by BrightCore. They returned now, carrying unfinished dreams. Vanessa was invited to the Future of Tech Equity Summit to present the center's transparency model. She delivered just one line. "Equity doesn't mean everyone starts at the finish line. Equity means the ones once locked out finally get to walk through the front door." Meanwhile, Patrick Gaines, the man behind the smear campaign, came under investigation. The anonymous account was traced to a fake media firm funded by his shell companies. Imani made no public comment. She simply posted one sentence on LinkedIn. The more public we are, the harder it is to distort us. That weekend, Imani and Vanessa stood atop the center's rooftop, overlooking streams of young people exiting labs, libraries, and startup workshops below. Vanessa took a sip of tea, eyes glossy with emotion. Do you think we really changed anything? Imani smiled, her gaze distant but calm. See them? Every step they take crushes the fear we used to walk on. That's enough. Below, a brown-skinned girl tugged her mother's sleeve, pointing to the glowing building. Mom, I want to be an engineer there someday. The mother's eyes filled as she smiled. If you study hard, work with heart, and live with purpose, you won't need anyone's permission to enter any room. Final scene. A single line fades in across the screen. We don't build to retaliate. We build so no one ever has to bow again. Carter Center for Innovation, where a new kind of power begins, not through privilege, but through justice. Not everyone is born into rooms where they're welcomed with respect. Many of us, especially Black women, have stepped into spaces where our presence was treated like a problem. They acted like we were invisible, called us delivery staff, assistants, or just not the right fit. And what hurts more than their words is how sometimes we start to believe them. But if you've ever been like Imani, pushed out for not fitting their mold, walking quietly while your heart still burned, then remember this. You weren't born to fit their system. You were born to create your own. This isn't a story about revenge. It's a story about justice, about choosing not to remain a victim, about a Black woman who stared into a rigged structure and said, I'm not asking for opportunity, I'm building it. So if you're in a place where you feel dismissed, overlooked, or shoved to the margins, look toward the Carter Center for Innovation. Once a fortress of exclusion, now the foundation for those like you to stand without bowing. Don't shrink, don't disappear, don't apologize for being here. Stand tall and rebuild right over the ashes they left for you.